All right, good afternoon. My name is Breanna Belfontaine-Krupski. I am with the Office of Teaching and Learning at the Maine Department of Education. I'm the Civics Teacher Leader Fellow. This afternoon, we are joined by David Olson, the Director of Education at Retro Report, which is a super awesome educational resource organization that kind of is working towards reigniting some journalism in classrooms and trying to just integrate all things awesome and adaptable in our classrooms with current events and history lessons and just all sorts of awesome stuff. So, um, just need to plug, this is not an endorsement by the Maine DOE, but it is a resource that we would love to share with you all. So I'm going to allow David to talk a little bit about his organization and all the resources they have now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brianna. And yes, I think one of the important things for folks who might be watching this to know is that, yes, even though Maine DOE can't officially endorse, I mean, one of the good things is all of these resources are entirely free, freely accessible. So, you don't have to worry about trying to justify, either you paying for this or department or any of that sort of thing. Also, if folks are watching the recording and wanting to check out the materials directly and to see the slide deck and that sort of thing, this shortened URL down at the bottom here, so bit.ly/RR-ME25. That's for you folks here in the state of Maine. So
Thank
this
you.
yeah, so this slide deck will remain here open and accessible for anybody to come back and view. So I give you just a brief tour here over the next 45 minutes or so to take a look at all sorts of great Retro Report resources. One thing as we start, anyone who's watching or anyone who's new to Retro Report, the one thing you have to do though to be able to see the classroom resources, which I'll highlight today, is create an account. It's totally free. It takes less than a minute to do. Super easy. So if you're watching this, you can go ahead and scan this QR code, or you can enter that shortened URL. You'll also be prompted when you're on our website if you're on one of the video pages and then want to go look at the lesson and the activity that goes with it. If you're not signed in, there'll be a nice little banner that says create your account here or sign in to view the resources. As Brianna mentioned, my name is David Olson. I'm the Director of Education at Retro Report, where I've been for about the past 3.5 years, a little bit more than that now. I came to this position from the classroom. I was a longtime social studies teacher, primarily at the high school level, but I've taught middle school, high school, community college. I'm actually currently teaching a course at the University of Wisconsin-Madison
Nice.
on the Supreme Court. Yeah, it's a ton of fun.
That's so
Um,
fun.
and so I have plenty of experience in the classroom. I also have done a lot of work with other history and civic education organizations. So that's my plug just at the beginning to say, I know that oftentimes people who do PD for educators may not have actually been in the classroom with people, so you don't have to worry about that from the people who are in charge at Retro Report. We definitely have experience in the classroom and work with teachers across the country who are fantastic educators in their own right. Retro Report is a nonprofit, nonpartisan journalism organization. We've been around for about 13 years now, and really the birth of Retro Report was in trying to follow up on stories from history and explain how and why they're still relevant to us today. So we are an organization of journalists. There's a couple educators like me that get to be in the room too. But it's people who are researching, investigating, finding great archival footage, and doing that historical digging, who are putting together short form documentaries that are perfect for use in the classroom. And our goal, like I said, is really to try to connect past and present, to explain here's how these stories from history are relevant to us today. And sometimes our stories go the other way, right? It starts with here's what's happening now. Here's this current event. What's the history we need to know to understand, to give it context, and to help us make sense of what's happening in this moment? We have over 300 films available on our website, all of which are entirely free. And then we're well over half now with our films having ready-to-use classroom resources, lesson plans, student activities. We're working on creating some additional great interactive resources to be used in classrooms, spanning pretty much all of the social studies areas, but also we dabble and branch out into like environmental science. We have some great resources for. We have some great stuff for health classes, a ton of stuff that could be used in English and ELA courses. So you can find all sorts of wonderful things at Retro Report. Why you might actually use Retro Report? Number one, I think what we do is very engaging. We tell interesting stories, and we provide the perspective of people who actually lived the history
Yeah.
going through. So I think I'll show you some examples here, but I think we are able to capture some great and compelling interviews when we dive into these topics. The price is right. Like I said, all of our resources, films, lessons, activities, all of that. We do a ton of PD. Things like that are completely free. Okay. Our films are short. They tend to be in and around like the 10-minute mark. A bunch, including some ones that I'll show you today, are even shorter than that, especially some that are more geared towards like skill building and that sort of thing. And like I said, I think we do a good job of sort of bridging the past and the present. I'll show you an example here. This first one is a film called How the U.S. Has Treated Wartime Refugees. So I think this one is particularly great if you are teaching U.S. history class and you're looking at the Vietnam War. It's great in a civics and government class when you're looking at the topic of immigration in general, and sort of having that debate about, what sort of obligation does the U.S. have to people fleeing war-torn regions? How do we make decisions about who is allowed to enter this country, and all of that sort of thing? So we'll take a brief look at a segment of this film.
Many Ukrainian refugees will wish to stay in Europe, but we also will welcome 100,000 Ukrainians to the United States.
The U.S. is opening its doors to some of the millions of Ukrainians who have fled their homes to escape the violence of the Russian invasion.
It's the biggest number of people displaced in Europe in the shortest amount of time since World War II.
What obligation does the U.S. have to refugees whose countries have been torn apart by war? It's a question the country has often faced.
Afghans are thronging to Kabul's airport.
Most recently, after a precipitous withdrawal from the war in Afghanistan and the return of the Taliban in August 2021.
I have all documents to go US. Please.
In the chaotic evacuation of Kabul, priority was given to Afghans who had worked alongside U.S. troops in the decades-long war against terrorism and faced reprisal at the hands of the Taliban, like Namat-ul-Ajagori.
I'm sure if the Taliban knows that I work with them, they will kill all of us, my whole family.
As the U.S. takes in families from Afghanistan and now Ukraine, what can be learned from the experiences of a different set of refugees who arrived in the U.S. nearly 50 years ago?
When I saw the footage of the fall of Kabul, I said that was us in Saigon in 1975.
In 1975, Carolee Tran was 8 years old and living in Saigon as the Vietnam War finally neared its end.
In Vietnam, my family and I were upper middle class. My father, he was a major in the Vietnamese army. We had a very comfortable life.
But all that changed as the army of Communist North Vietnam closed in on Saigon and the U.S. pulled out the last of its troops and diplomats.
There was this sense of impending doom. Several people said to me, begged me, please take my children out of the country with you.
People like Carolee Tran's father, who had fought alongside American soldiers, were desperate to have their families evacuated to safety.
People, lorries, and cars, all chasing one American evacuation convoy after the other.
But American officials, unprepared for such a quick exit, knew they couldn't save all their allies.
Who could be killed, who would be tortured, who worked to advance our government's interest. So who do we owe?
Saigon, April the 30th. The last American helicopter on the roof of the American embassy prepares to lift off the last of the evacuees. Scores of people still crowded onto the embassy roof in the vain hope of rescue.
All right, so that's just a quick segment of that one. In total, that film is right at around 10 minutes. We saw about 2.5, 3 minutes of that one. And so from here, I'll dive in and show you how to find Retro Report resources, how to navigate our website, what some of our resources actually look like. So if you go to retroreport.org, this is our homepage. This is what you'll see. Up here at the top, the best way to find sort of our full library, to be able to wade through, sort by subject, all of that sort of thing. If you click on Explore by Topic, it will bring up the video library right here. This is arranged, sort of the default is the most recent films that we have produced are up first. So actually a great one. I know, especially if you're teaching U.S. history, you're probably right around the time where you're either inching up to or hitting, World War II. This one is great. This one is actually an excerpt of a longer film, but it talks about how sort of that early civil rights movement and Double V campaign connects with how Japan and Nazi Germany were using propaganda, racial propaganda against the United States during World War II. There's some really excellent primary source analysis in that one. Here, the film we saw, if I type in refugee, I'll begin to see some of those examples. And that was this one, how the U.S. has treated wartime refugees. Here, this is what the video page looks like. The video is embedded right here at the top. So it's also on our YouTube channel. So you can either send students here to watch the film, you can watch it from here in class, or you could use the YouTube embed that way if you'd like as well. One of the things people watching this will likely notice is I tend to play videos with the closed caption on. I do that on purpose. It's a great practice to get into in working with all students, but in particular English language learners. If you've ever used YouTube auto caption, it's not great. It's not very accurate. You're like, man, I don't even think that's a word in English, let alone what they actually said, right? Breanna, you agree with me, right?
I agree.
Yeah, it's not good. Now, the good news is you won't have that problem with Retro Report. We upload our own caption file, so
nice.
it is actually what the people are saying. It is timed correctly, all of those things.
Yay.
I know. As you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a short write-up here. You'll see links to the lesson plans. This is the place where if you are not logged in or don't yet have an account, right here under For Teachers is where you'll see the, hey, create an account so you can access Retro Report resources. We also have the full transcript available there as well. Another great thing to use, with students, especially for language acquisition or vocabulary or those sorts of things. So you can either click on the lesson plans here or just keep scrolling on down the page. When we get here to our first lesson plan, I'll get to our links and our documents here in a moment. But here, the overview gives us a quick snapshot. We can also hit these little drop-down carrots here for my objectives, my essential questions, all of that sort of thing. When I click on the lesson plan and student activity, these are going to take me to the Google Docs that are associated with these. The lesson plan is the teacher-facing document. So this document's going to tell me what subject, what grade level, what are my essential questions, objectives, what materials do I need, and really it's, links to the digital materials for the most part. And then what am I actually going to have my students do? What is the procedure? All of that sort of thing. If I click on the student activity, as the name would suggest, this is the student-facing document, right? We create all of these in Google Docs because we want it to be as easy as possible for teachers to be able to use these in their classroom, right? I spent way too many hours of my life as a teacher hunting for good resources, finding something that was almost good enough, right? There were some things I wanted to change. And then you discover it's in a PDF and you go, great, now the next hour of my life is going to be recreating someone's almost good enough work to work in my classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to avoid that. So what you can do, just click on File, make a copy. You have your own version. You can make whatever adjustments you need to make it work in your classroom. What you'll find across all RetroReport resources, the lessons, activities that go with the film, is there'll be some questions that go with the film, right? Pretty standard. We'll have the film link embedded here, some questions that go with it. But then really we work with other educators who write these for us to figure out like what else should go with this. Is it primary source analysis? Is it preparation for a discussion? Is it an inquiry activity, right? All sorts of different things that you'll find across our resources. Here, it has students look at some primary sources of legislation that changes over time, how we deal with immigration, who we allow into the country. Here, there's also an interactive map. I'm going to show you this because it's one of my favorites. I'm a sucker for a good map, right? So this map is called Foreign-Born Population, a Nation of Overlapping Diasporas. And what this shows us is, this is an interactive map. It's not our creation, but it's one that works perfectly with this lesson. It's a free and open resource. So it's something that we link in and fold into the lesson and activity here. So here you can drag this little slider at the bottom to see over time, how does immigration to the United States change decade by decade? This map is pulling from US Census data. There's a question on there that, asks people, what country were you born in? And if people mark that they were born outside of the United States, they fill in what country they were born in. And this tells us not only what country folks are from, but there's also this heat map of where are folks migrating to. And we can see how that changes, like I said, going back all the way to 1850 up through the 2020 census, right? The other cool thing is you can click on an individual country over here. So we're looking at 2020 and looking at a country like Cuba, right? If I click on Cuba over here, maybe. Oh, maybe I have to click on it on the map. Yeah, there we go. Now it took a moment for it. This will show me a heat map of where do people who were born in Cuba live in the United States. As we may have expected, southern Florida, pretty common there for Cuban-born Americans. One of the other cool things is you can search by county. I'm a big proponent of making this local, right? I live in Dane County, Wisconsin. That's where Madison is. So this shows me where in the world people who are living in Dane County, Wisconsin, if they were born outside the U.S., where were they born? And again, I can make this change over time, decade by decade, right? So this is, again, not something that we created at RetroReport, although we do have a couple amazing interactive maps, but it's the type of thing that we fold into our lesson to say like, yep, here is what you would do to go along with, a great short film. All right, let me show you some other examples here. This one, I was talking about, World War II and Double V campaign. This is a great example. This one is another lesson that has a great primary source connected activity. I'll show you just a quick clip of this one.
We must have more ships, more guns, more planes, more of everything. We must be the great arsenal of democracy.
In the early 1940s, as the United States prepared to join the war, Black Americans were kept out of lucrative factory jobs. They were denied combat roles in the Army and Navy, which were fully segregated, and could not join the Marine Corps at all.
The conventional wisdom at the time was that African Americans won't fight, thinking that We didn't have enough intelligence, smarts to understand orders. We're typically, because of our race, ignorant people with no talent. Thomas Holcomb was the Commandant of the United States Marine Corps. He was famous for saying, if it came to 250,000 African Americans or 5,000 whites, he would take the 5,000 whites.
But many Black Americans were angry about being shut out of the war preparations. President Franklin Roosevelt reluctantly met with labor leader A. Philip Randolph, who asked him to open defense jobs and military combat roles to Black Americans.
Negro people feel they have earned the right to participate in every phase of the government.
Roosevelt failed to meet his demands, so Randolph began organizing a 100,000-man march on Washington. This did not sit well with the president.
The president, he said, we can't have 100,000 Negroes marching on Washington. If anything such as that were to occur, you wouldn't be able to manage them. He said, now let us get on to business here and find out what can be done.
All right. So again, that's just a short segment of this one. One of the things I want to note with the lesson and activity that goes with this, not only is it a good fit in U.S. history courses, but one of the things that comes out of this movement, out of the Double V campaign and this advocacy of African Americans during World War II is a couple of important executive orders. Right. Obviously, executive orders are in the news, something that we go, what are these? What power does the president have over time in different periods of our history? How have presidents used this? There's actually two different executive orders that students take a look at during this or as part of this lesson. One ends up desegregating the defense industries under Roosevelt. The next one desegregates under Truman the military itself, right? So definitely use of executive order as a way to expand rights, to change clear policies of the government, and a way that I think can be useful for students to understand, what are some ways that executive orders are used in this country. So not only can we explore things in history, but we can also use Retro Report to explore, with some historical background, a number of issues, right? One of our most recent films deals with Second Amendment rights. And so here the title is How Gun Violence and the Supreme Court Have Shaped Second Amendment Rights. This one, I think, in part is a great film because we do get multiple perspectives, right? We hear from people who are gun control advocates. We hear from people who are Second Amendment right proponents, honestly, in a way that expounds on their own experience, is not inflammatory, is not meant to be divisive rhetoric, but really to come at this hot button topic in a way that's respectful and born out of experience. I know, it's one of those unfortunate facts of life that almost every part of the country has dealt with, mass shootings and mass casualties. I know where I am in Madison, Wisconsin, just a few months ago, we had a school shooting. I know just a couple years ago in Maine, it was probably the deadliest attack in the history of the state of Maine occurred as a mass casualty incident. So here we'll check out and take a look just at a clip of this one as well.
Take our rights! We say no! DC gun ban has to go!
That changed 74 years later in a 2008 case called District of Columbia versus Heller, when the Supreme Court struck down a long-standing D.C. law that made legal handgun ownership virtually impossible.
It's the first case to essentially hold that individuals have rights to keep and bear arms for purposes completely unrelated to a well-regulated militia. And so after Heller, what happened was people had a right to say, I'm not a member of a militia, but I have a right to keep and bear arms in my home for personal purposes like self-defense.
That Supreme Court decision was limited in scope, as it only applied to federal areas like Washington, D.C. However, many other cities also had extensive restrictions on handgun ownership. Chicago passed its ordinance in the 1980s, spurred by rising crime and the assassination attempt on then-President Ronald Reagan.
The Chicago City Council decided to try to control handguns by severely limiting their registration.
In 2007, I came face to face with 3 men having broken into my home at my back sliding glass door. I literally was 8 inches away from their faces. I mean, to this day, I could tell you every pore, every scar on their faces.
Shaken by the experience, Colleen Lawson decided to apply for a handgun license, but was denied.
All right. So again, just a brief look at that one. This lesson activity has, a full activity that has students examine Second Amendment rights and this debate over gun control and regulation from multiple different perspectives. I think is a really great way to have students look at this topic in a way where, like I said, they get to view multiple perspectives, multiple rational perspectives that are not sort of caught up in inflammatory rhetoric about this issue, but actually approach it very responsibly.
It is really good. I actually used it a couple weeks ago. Because we were in our segment of understanding DC versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago. So it was really good. You guys.
Excellent. Yeah. Is that so? Breanna, are you an AP Gov teacher?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll show with this one, and then we actually have a bunch of films that tie directly. If we have other AP Gov teachers who are viewing this, I think we're up to like 6 or 7 films that tie to the required AP cases, and a ton of resources to go with them, including a whole bunch of ready-to-use FRQs. So I'll show folks how to find. We have some great collections, including across a number of AP courses that I'll show folks how to find as well. So here, the next sort of pivot we'll make here is not only do we have stuff for history, not only do we have stuff that focuses on hot button issues, but we also have some great resources that are connected to skills that students need. So one example here is we have some great resources for media literacy. We produced a couple of short films, and this one that I'm going to show you is actually really short. It's like 1.5 minutes long. But we created this with what was the Stanford History Education Group, is now the Digital Inquiry Group, a group at MIT and the University of North Carolina, studying these sorts of things of how do we learn some of these key media literacy skills. And part of the goal here was, how do we teach a key media literacy skill, in this case, lateral reading, without making it like an instructive video of here's how lateral reading works, here are the steps that you take, but instead trying to change people's behavior with a story, right? With a narrative that might nudge people in the right direction to change their behavior. So here I'll show you this one. We'll see in its entirety because it's really short.
How can you determine whether a story like this one is accurate?
On Twitter, she's been dubbed the worst aunt ever. New York tabloids even crowned her the Antichrist.
Did you ever hear about the woman who sued her cousin's son after an exuberant hug led to a broken wrist?
That's right, $127,000 over a hug.
Since it's illegal to publicly flog her, we can all do our best to shame her to death.
When you hear something this sensational, it's usually a good idea to stop and ask yourself, is there more to the story?
The whole world is coming out saying I'm this horrible, evil person.
On the internet, things aren't always what they seem. So don't just read the original post. Get off the page and open a new tab to do a new search about the source or claim. Check if it is credible, and look for trusted sources or in-depth news stories, like this one, with Jennifer Connell and her cousin's son that set the record straight.
Condemnation against Jennifer Connell came fast and furious. But was it fair?
It turns out that Connell required 3 surgeries. Filing a lawsuit was the only way she could get her cousin's homeowner's insurance to pay her medical bills. There was no ill will in the family.
I felt like everybody was saying stuff that they didn't know.
But the damage was done. Connell has struggled to reclaim her reputation.
People reached out and then canceled interviews. It was very difficult to find another job.
She's had to take steps to obscure her identity. But online, her name will forever be linked to the original story. Remember, get off the page and use the internet to check the internet.
There you go. It's a good lesson for all of us, right? And so this is one that we have this one that focuses on lateral reading. We have another one that's somewhat similar, tells a different story and connected to a different practice, which is doing a reverse image search. And here, this one, both of these that I mentioned have a ready-to-use, like short, no more than 1 period activity to go with them. So here, again, on the video page, we have the film embedded. If we scroll down a little bit, the student activity here, there's just a couple questions that go with the film to check for understanding, and then has students dive in and practice lateral reading for themselves. So we've provided some, 3 different example stories for students to practice this on. But again, with putting this in Google Docs where you're making your own copy, really easy to swap in, if you have another story in mind or if you want something more connected to your content area. This is the first one that shows up here. California legalizes composting human bodies, right? So the job for students here is to go through this article, figure out, based on a number of different clues and prompts, what can they determine while they're on the page, and then getting off the page, engaging in lateral reading. What can they pull from this article to search? Can they either debunk the information in this article? Can they confirm or corroborate the information in this article? And then sort of do an analysis based on your lateral reading. How accurate was the original article? What are some of the elements from your search that helped you determine whether or not this article is legitimate, right? So let's actually put that into practice. Like I said, we've got this one, we've got a great one about reverse image searches. So some great ways very quickly where you can, beef up your students' skills in engaging in media literacy here. We think a little broader about some of the skills that we want to help students build. This past October, Retro Report had a series that aired on PBS. It was a 4-part series, a show called Citizen Nation. If you haven't seen it, it's really excellent. You can find it not only on our website, but on the PBS app. I think it's still also on Amazon Prime. It's really good. We followed students, teachers, and teams competing in the We the People program, followed like 10 different schools across the country as students were engaging in this activity. And then what we created to go along with the show is 6 films that were kind of a departure for us because they are very student-centered. They are, putting students at the forefront of demonstrating some of these skills for us. And what we wanted to be able to help students build skills-wise was, number one, some tools for research. How can they, develop research topics? How can they sort through credible evidence? How can they navigate their way through what might be difficult readings or corroborate things they're finding online? The second set of skills was engaging in civil discourse. How can we get students to talk to each other, to discuss? How can we help them build their skills for developing claims and supporting that with evidence, addressing counterclaims, things like that? And then how can we move those civic skills sort of beyond the classroom? What are ways that we can work to get our students civically engaged? And for each of these skills, we have two different films that sort of address some of these areas. And then across those 6 films, we have like 20 different lessons and activities that you can use. I'll show you the full resource collection here in a moment. But first, I want to show you one of my favorites from this that falls in that first category of sort of building those research skills. So here we're going to hear from a young woman, a high school student, who talks about some strategies she uses to dive into challenging texts, to be able to gain information from them, and some tips that she has.
My name is Journey Love Taylor. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I attend Wauwatosa West High School. And I'm here to teach you guys some research habits I've learned. Researching things that hit very close to home helps me feel more passionate, and it makes me more engaged. In a bit, I'll show you how I break down an article and understand a text. I've lived in Milwaukee my entire life, and a way I would describe it is very chaotic, very diverse, and I think it's a very unique place full of different people. And it is very segregated. This is due to a lot of our history and redlining. Redlining was when the government drew lines around neighborhoods to determine home loan eligibility. Neighborhoods with people of color were outlined in red and considered ineligible for these loans, enforcing racial segregation across the country. Despite redlining being barred in 1968, it is still very present, as Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in America. I can see the impacts of redlining in my daily life. When you look at past redline maps and compare it to today Milwaukee, you can see the impacts have everlasting effects. To this day, minority groups have difficulties finding homes. I've seen stuff from different cities, not even just Milwaukee, of people having the same issue. Initially, I got a lot of my research off TikTok and other social media.
Through much of the 20th century, Black folks who attempted to purchase a home were systematically denied bank loans through a practice called redlining.
And Black people were not allowed to live in non-Black neighborhoods.
What? Do I care about the people in the neighborhoods?
It's okay to get your information from there, but now I double check my sources and I go to outside places to get information. If you want to find out more about a topic, one thing that's difficult is sorting through different articles. In my civics class, we've had to annotate numerous articles, and my longest one was 56 pages long. Annotating can simplify your time, so you don't have to constantly go back to the same article and read through those lengthy pages again.
All right. So I'll show you how to find the resources, find this particular collection, and where all of our collections live. Right. So if we're back here at our library page, right, where we see all of the individual films, right, you can find this one if I put in, analyzing. If I can spell analyzing, that would be helpful. Analyzing challenging text, there she is. But the place where all of this lives, over here where you have type, if you click on collection, this is part of our Citizen Nation Civic Skills collection. So if I click on that collection, what I'm going to find is not only the 6 films that I referenced that we sort of created as a companion series, but we also have excerpts from all 4 episodes of the show, along with the lessons and activities that go with those as well. But if we scroll down a little bit here to find Journey, there she is again, because she shows up in the show and in one of our other segments too. But here, the civic skills strategies for analyzing challenging texts. If I click on lessons and activities, it'll take me here. And this one actually has 3 ready-to-use lessons and activities that go with it. The one I'll show you here, because I know that whenever I show this to educators, there's the part where Journey Love says, well, I started by going to TikTok, right? And teachers everywhere go, oh, no, you've hurt my soul, Journey Love. Like, yes. Don't do that. Except that's precisely where students start, right? And so here, the purpose of this activity is to help students become critical consumers of what they might see on TikTok. How can they use that as a starting place to engage in research, right? So as we check out here, there's a great political cartoon that it starts with. But then as we scroll down, the last big chunk of this has students go through, they view a short TikTok video, but then go through and figure out how can I go through the process of fact checking this? What sort of figures or statistics or information is cited? Can I actually find those? Can I corroborate? The other thing I'll say for teachers watching this, we have the links here to the TikTok videos, but I also know that in most schools, TikTok itself is not accessible like on a school network. We did put those together here. We downloaded them and have them available like via Google Drive, so that if you want to watch one of these videos, it's accessible right here and open.
When Taylor Swift asks, the Swifties deliver.
There you go. So students can watch the video here without actually going to TikTok, but still engage in that same process.
Nice.
So it's still there and available for you to do. I'll show you here before I get to that some of our other collections and places where you can find things. I know, Breanna, you mentioned, you teach AP Gov. I'll show you where you can find the other AP resources. So again, if I click on collection, we have some great ones here. Some that might connect to specific courses you teach, like if people are teaching an ethnic studies course. Right now, we're in the middle of Black History Month. We've got a great collection of films that relate to Black history. Women's History Month is coming up soon. I know for a lot of folks, this is time where we're getting not only to World War II, but then to Cold War. We have our global Cold War collection. We have a separate Cold War collection looking at the Cold War in Latin America, a number of different things. And then we have them aligned with 6 different AP courses. And I can show you here what we've done in those alignments is actually go through unit by unit. And then in the case of APUSH, with some of the later units, actually topic by topic, to say, here are the films that fit and connect, right? So if you're teaching AP Gov and you're doing civil rights and civil liberties, we can learn about the First Amendment, freedom of the press. This one's actually about the Pentagon Papers case. This one here about school prayer is about Engel versus Vitale, right? We've got Brown v. Board. We've got a look at things like affirmative action. So yeah, we can go all the way through. There's a whole bunch here in civil rights and civil liberties. We've got ones that connect to political ideologies and beliefs or political participation. So some great things here. And honestly, as an AP teacher, it's a great place to start, especially as you're thinking about, yep, we're moving to that next unit. Come check out what the options are here, and I think you'll find some great things that can plug right in. Beyond that, we like to engage in other PD, like I'm doing now with teachers from Maine. Next week, if anyone sees this between now and February 18th, on the evening of February 18th, we are doing a webinar with the Council on Foreign Relations Education group, looking at U.S.-China relations. We are releasing a new film early next week about Nixon's visit to China in 1972, and sort of how that changes our relationship, and then where we've gone since that surprise visit in the early 70s. We have some other films coming up, including a look at the Berkeley free speech movement, one that looks at apartheid divestment. Those two actually have some connection to a film we did for Frontline last spring about protests on college campuses, right? So the Berkeley free speech movement sort of draws a parallel of like how similar or different is sort of some of those early free speech movements on campus with current campus protests. The apartheid divestment one really was born out of, the call from people who were, have been protesting on college campuses to for colleges to divest from funding the government of Israel. So this one looks back to, the 1970s and 80s, where there were calls to do this with the government of South Africa, and what effect did it actually have? Another film we're set to release fairly soon is about the use of the atomic bomb in World War II. This August will actually be the 80th anniversary of the use of the atomic bomb. And so this one, looks back at that event. We actually have some interviews with some Japanese survivors of the atomic blasts in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So some really, really excellent stuff on the way. I mentioned our collections, and like I said, we've got a number of different things. So this is a great place if you want to see, some things grouped together that might be easy for you. You can share with your science teacher friends our one on environmental education. With your English teacher friends, we've got a number of retro reports that sort of line up with commonly used texts, like whether it's Mouse or Diary of Anne Frank, To Kill a Mockingbird, any of those things. We've got, here's the sort of plug and play retro report film that goes with it. As I finish up here, again, the best way to hear from us and to make sure that you can access all of our classroom resources is to go ahead and register on our site. There is a little like checkbox on there. We have a weekly education newsletter. We actually just passed 10,000 teachers on that newsletter that we're reaching. I know, it's an amazing milestone. So we're reaching 10,000 teachers every week with new films, new classroom resources, PD, recommendations on things that are timely and how they might fit into your classroom. So we definitely are working to try to serve teachers and to provide teachers with all sorts of great things that they can put to use directly in their classroom.
Yeah. I know it's my personal, like, one of my top 3 favorite organizations to use in my classroom. And truly, like, I will say this, and for anybody who watches, like, the lesson plans and aspects, they are really adaptable. And I know my kids, like, anytime I've shown a couple of the films, they are watching. They're not looking at other things. They are watching, and they appreciate that they're, under 15 minutes. So, awesome things. I love the connections. I love the history to current events. And I really hope more and more people subscribe to your newsletters and jump on the website, because it's really awesome. It's a really awesome organization. Y'all are doing good stuff.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And people can always reach out to me directly. David Olson, email is dolson, DOLSON @retroreport.com. Again, our goal is to be responsive to educators, to figure out what you folks need, and to create resources that you can plug into your classroom. So thank you so much for having me, Breanna.
Thank you so much for having us and coming on and talk with Maine teachers, and hopefully they'll see you on some PD at some point.
Excellent. Thank you so much.